I remember when I was in mainstream television news and started to get into the YouTube world. I was watching independent commentary on the media, and it was fascinating to hear my industry discussed from people who were very critical of it. And it was one of the dimensions of my exit from mainstream media was getting into the alternative media world and seeing how my industry was perceived by the outsiders. And I went through this stage of real, I think, like frustration and anger, where I would see things through these other people's eyes, and I was like, they're right. Why are we doing it this way? You know, this is terrible, and we're causing serious harm in a lot of cases. And we use terms in mainstream news like hate speech or misinformation. Those were starting to become more and more common, but I have to say hate speech was definitely the hot term in like 2018, I would say. Okay, and so the reason I'm bringing this up is because if you remember, that is back when Alex Jones was originally banned from a bunch of these different platforms, right? Remember, there was this unilateral ban, like Facebook and YouTube and I think Twitter. They all did it at the same time. This is an article from August 6, 2018. From NPR, it says YouTube, Apple, and Facebook ban InfoWars, which decries mega purge. Okay, so they're talking about this unilateral sweep of Alex Jones, which I remember. I remember barely did I even know who Alex Jones was other than Sandy Hook. I knew very little background on him when I was in TV news, but I do remember because I was now plugged into the independent commentary world in 2018. I was starting to wake up to these tech platforms and how they were starting to curate content based on, like I was saying, at the time, hate speech was the trigger term. And so if you read through this article, because I kind of wanted to go back in time, and I'll show you in a second why this matters because of something that just came out in the Associated Press. And thank you for somebody on Locals for alerting me to this, because the Associated Press has now written an article about, well, what's the future of misinformation now? And because of the trial, because of the verdict against Alex Jones, and the amount of money he's going to have to spend now to pay back this judgment of what he was saying about Sandy Hook. Now, the Associated Press has gone from the sort of hate speech world to COVID and other topics. And I think at the time, that's what people were saying would happen with the deplatforming of others, starting with Alex Jones. And now the question is, okay, how is this going to play out in courtrooms? Is there going to be an escalation in that regard as well? But I wanted to go back in time for a quick second and look at this article from NPR, because if you read through it, as I have, what they are saying is that, or at least what these tech platforms tried to say at the time, was that conspiracy theory was not the reason they were coming after him, that it was hate speech. And I read through a bunch of articles about this incident, and they're all the mainstream articles anyway, all basically say the same thing, because they're regurgitating the statements from the big tech platforms. And what they're saying is that it has nothing to do with his conspiracy theories. It has to do with hate speech. Again, like I said, at the time, that was the hot buzzword. For instance, here's a quote from Apple and iTunes, who deleted, it says here, and I'm sure it probably includes more videos at this point or podcasts, but at the time it was 5 podcasts related to InfoWars and Jones. Apple does not tolerate hate speech, the company said in a statement. We believe in representing a wide range of views so long as people are respectful to those with differing opinions. So in the NPR article, you can see how they reference hate speech mostly as the reason. So I'll just show you this one from Vox. This is from August 6th, also 2018. And this says, subheadline is, why some on the right are calling it collusion. That hasn't gone away. YouTube, Facebook, and Apple's ban on Alex Jones explained. Well, they go on to talk about how Jones and his various sites are leading purveyors of violent and sometimes racist and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. And Spotify says that InfoWars expressly and principally promotes, advocates, or incites hatred or violence against a group or individual based on characteristics. And that's why they blocked him, not because of conspiracy theories. So I just want to go back to that sentence real fast one more time just to make it really clear. Again, this is Spotify. The tech companies say, well, they're talking about generally the tech companies, okay? But then they say in Spotify's words, the tech companies say they blocked InfoWars not because of the conspiracy theories, but because, in Spotify's words, InfoWars expressly and principally promotes, advocates, or incites hatred or violence against a group or individual based on characteristics. Let me go check on you on Locals and see what people are saying. We did a whole live stream on this video where people got to give me feedback to help me craft my commentary at AllisonMorrow.locals.com. You can join my editorial board and participate in that. Some of these commentary videos I'm going to start doing live on Locals and then get feedback from people who are in the chat. And that way I just get other perspectives in it. So go to AllisonMorrow.locals.com, sign up and be part of my editorial board. Anyway, like I was saying, so here we go. All right, so this came out August 6th, 2022. Wait a second. Is that weird? Didn't I read these articles were August 6th, 2018? Is that it's a little weird that it's the same exact date. You know what? Hang on a second. I got to go back and check that. Is that real? Hang on a second. I got to go back and check because that seems so weird. Yes, it is. Like, check this out. Okay, hang on. Check this out. The Vox one, right? August 6th, 2018. So the article comes out August 6th, 2022, exactly 4 years later. What's going on there? Somebody tell me what's going on with this. That's just weird. That's weird, dude. Okay, I'm just going to leave it there. I think it's weird. Just going to leave it there, but okay, it's normal. It's exactly 4 years to the date. Whatever, I'm just going to leave that there. So the article from the AP, Alex Jones' $49.3 million verdict and the future of misinformation. So they talk about how he's going to have to pay $49.3 million in damages. But what is the week's verdict, the first of these 3 Sandy Hook related cases against Jones, mean for larger misinformation ecosystem? A social media fueled world of election. I can't even say the word because I'm going to say it if this is on YouTube. By the way, if you're watching this on YouTube or anywhere else, we're doing this live on Locals. So you could have gotten all the commentary and everything in between and help give me feedback with the video and all that stuff if you were watching on Locals. So you go to AllisonMorrow.locals.com. But I'm not going to say that word because this video is going on YouTube. But anyway, elections, COVID-19, and other dubious claims that the InfoWars conspiracy theorist helped build. Okay, so let me just go back and read that again. What does this week's verdict mean for the larger misinformation ecosystem, a social media fueled world of this other stuff? Okay, basically disinformation that he helped build. What I think is interesting about the AP article is something that happens a lot of times in mainstream media. And that is they pose a question, right? A question is posed that's basically rhetorical because they want to answer the question to benefit the direction in which they see the world should go. All right, so one way to say I'm still doing journalism and I'm not having an opinion, but to move the conversation in the direction I want it, would be exactly what we see in the AP. What does this week's verdict mean for the larger misinformation ecosystem? And then I won't read the rest, and then there's a question mark. So when you see that in corporate news, and the AP, remember, their stuff goes everywhere and it gets repeated line for line in some cases by the local newsrooms and newspapers and online. When one of these news stations poses as a journalist, but then they ask a question like this, in many cases, I'm not going to say all, but in many cases, it's because they want to move the conversation in that direction. Let me give you an example. I remember when Trump got COVID, and I watched my old newsroom do a story about, will Trump voters finally get the vaccine? Basically, that was the question posed. Or will Trump voters think differently about the vaccine? Now, it's posed as a question because if you put it as a question, then you're doing journalism. You're just asking a question, right? But the whole story was basically building a case for how we really hope the Trump supporters are going to get the vaccine and that they'll think differently now that Trump got COVID. Oh, it wasn't really a question because, frankly, there was very little debate about it in the story, if any at all. It was, if I remember correctly, the only guy they interviewed was like the head of the Republican committee in Washington State, and he just basically regurgitated that talking point. You know, well, we hope so. We hope people are going to change their minds. So the article was posed as a question, but it really wasn't. And so I say this just because I think it's important as a consumer of media to see how this kind of works. It's like, well, you know, you're in an editorial board and you're like, oh man, you know, we think reality should be like this. But we're not going to just say that because that would make us opinion artists, commentators, whatever, not journalists. So why don't we just pose the question? But really the question is a statement. And then you watch how they answer the question or who gets to answer the question, who they've included in answering the question. And how that person answers the question, you know, I'm not saying all the time. Sometimes there are fair questions posed. I remember, you know, in my history, going on and really genuinely not having an answer that I had in mind. I really didn't know the answer. I just wanted to explore it. So it's not every case, but I think in a significant amount of cases, when you see a question like this posed, it's because they want this to affect the larger misinformation ecosystem. That they're building a case for why it should. And I don't think you have to look that far to see that. I mean, they're already, you know, right at they end the question by naming things that they feel like are, you know, are misinformation that, you know, I think there are healthy debates happening about within the medical and science profession. So they've already taken a stand on what they think misinformation is because they say it in the end of their question. And it's really not, if you get into the world of the debates and conversations, discussions that medical professionals are having about these topics, specifically COVID, let's just say COVID-19, you know, it's not settled. And so to just say that you're skeptical of what does it even mean, COVID-19 skepticism? What does that mean? See, they just say that COVID-19 skepticism. What does that even mean? That's such a broad term. Okay, so that's just the first thing and sort of kind of main central point I want to point out. But here's where they talk about why they're, and this is not them quoting someone else. All right, this is the writer of the article, Michael Sisak, if I'm saying his name right. The distinction, this is why Jones, who attacked the parents of Sandy Hook victims, they're talking about the distinction between defamatory statements and free speech, okay? The distinction that they make here is why Jones is being forced to pay up while, quote, Holocaust deniers, flat earthers, and vaccine skeptics are free to post their theories without much fear of a multi-million-dollar court judgment. So now they're laying out other groups that they're lumping in this category and saying, see, these people can just get away with it. They could just get away with it. And there is a very, very important sentence in the middle of this AP article that leads me to believe that, once again, like I said, I think they're not posing a question here. They're making a statement with their question. After quoting Jones's lawyer about the potential chilling effect that this verdict could have on talk show hosts and their, quote, standard of care, that's the quote they use, the AP writes this: free speech experts say any chilling effect should be limited to people who wantonly disseminate false information, not journalists or other citizens making good faith efforts to get at the truth of a matter. Plenty of general, overly broad use of vocabulary here. And who gets to define what these words really mean? Free speech experts say. Who is a free speech expert? How, all of them say this? They're all in agreement of this following line? No. It's just the same as often used, like medical experts say, doctors say, professionals say, lawyers say. I mean, which ones say this? And do they all agree with this? And then they say any chilling effect should be limited to people who wantonly disseminate false information. What does that mean? So now we're judging intention. Like, what does it mean that you're wantonly disseminating false information? And who determines that false information? Who says it's false versus not? I mean, look at the community guidelines on YouTube. Allowing the government to spread false information is okay on YouTube. But other people get cited for saying the truth and get suspended for it. So who gets to decide? And then it says not journalists. Journalists shouldn't be held in that category of people who wantonly disseminate false information. Really? So what does that mean? You know, so we're saying that the press is never used to disseminate false information based on propaganda and press releases written by the government or other special interests. So they shouldn't be held accountable for doing it. That's not considered wantonly disseminating it. So they're in a special category. And so are other citizens making, quote, good faith efforts to get at the truth of the matter. There is so much in that sentence that could easily be corrupted. Big picture, for me, I don't really care what you think of Alex Jones. I know people, I'm friends with people who have a wide variety of different opinions about the guy. My point here is to show how we've gone from a place in the media reporting about Alex Jones, talking about how, hey, look, the big tech platforms got rid of him because it's hate speech, okay? To now the AP saying, but what about the larger ecosystem of misinformation? And posing it as a question when, like I say, I don't think it's really a question at all. And then listing things like COVID skeptics. And remember, back in the earlier articles, they were sort of pushing back on the idea, the tech platforms anyway, were pushing back on the idea that this is about conspiracy theory. It's not. It's about hate speech. And now it's like we're in this world where no, actually, these other topics are no-nos. And so we got to be careful about the ecosystem of misinformation. And I remember, like I said, back when I was in corporate news, I remember seeing this whole thing go down with Alex Jones. And I didn't really understand totally the significance of it when he was banned, but I did feel like it was setting some kind of precedent. And even though I wasn't even on YouTube at the time, I was concerned about that as a corporate journalist, because I don't know, I even when that wasn't even my world, I still saw that. I saw that as something that should be considered a potential, a potential warning for people who want to have access to different ideas, which even when I was in mainstream media, I wanted you to have access to different ideas. I wasn't one of those people who wanted to have the entire responsibility of world truth riding on her shoulders. I wanted you to be able to see other voices on the internet. I saw that as like, okay, this is a little, we'll see. Like, but I think this is a unsettling, and this could set a precedent for how they're gonna move the goalpost. And I agreed with a lot of the commentators who were paying attention to that, especially with how broad the new definitions of hate speech were becoming. What was hate speech? How do you define it? Like, what does that even mean? And the people that then followed Jones. So I think this is an opportunity to sort of look back over the last 4 years. Is this particular court case going to open up a new world of not just you're getting booted from the platforms, but you could be held liable in court? Is that going to happen? I mean, according to the AP article, that's not currently the atmosphere for defamation. That's not the definition for defamation. So maybe not a big deal. But according to the AP, there is this ecosystem of misinformation. And is this going to have an effect on it? I think pay attention to the reports that are coming out posing that question and moving the conversation in that direction, if in fact that's what you think they're doing. Because I do think this tees it up to push further. And like I said, originally, these tech companies were releasing statements that were like, no, we like wide variety of views. It's just hate speech. It's just hate speech. And now we're seeing people suspended and deplatformed for all kinds of different ideas that have nothing to do with hate speech. Okay. And so you can see, and I think if you don't pay attention to it, it's easy to have change blindness because it happens slowly over time. And we forget where we came from. So it's important to go back a few years and take a look at how are we talking about it back then. I think I've said this before, but if I bottle my own wine someday, I am calling it misinformation. For now, though, you can buy wine that supports my work that is not named misinformation, but is mystical. It's mystical. It's the best wine you can get. It's high altitude. It comes from Argentina, from very remote locations. You get 50% off the wine itself and 50% off shipping. However, if you're a coffee or a tea drinker, you can also go to twinenginecoffee.com/Allison. Oh, and by the way, the wine was AllisonWinePromo.com. AllisonWinePromo.com. But you can go to twinenginecoffee.com/Allison, get any number of high altitude Nicaraguan roasts. These are USDA certified organic. There's light roast, dark roast. There's a limited black edition. There's also a Caturra tea. If you're a tea drinker, it's the tea made from fruit that is around the coffee bean. It's a great way to support my work. So go to twinenginecoffee.com/Allison, AllisonWinePromo.com, support my work, and I will see you next time.